Okay. So,
Yep.
hello.
Hi.
To start off with, would you like to just say your name and where you are?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sonia Weyers, and I'm in Grès-sur-Loing in France. That's 10 kilometers south of Fontainebleau, if you know Fontainebleau. Otherwise, it's like 60 to 70 kilometers south of Paris.
Aha. Okay. The first question that I have for you, Sonia, is who are you as a human being? And you can answer that any way you want about your qualities, your passions, your values, just what makes you who you are as a person.
That's an interesting question. So I would say as a human being, I'm relentlessly curious. I'm always eager to develop. That's a sort of as characteristics. I would consider I have a certain amount of resilience that I've built over time. Then as a human in my environment, I'm a mom of 4 kids, and they're my biggest point of pride of anything I've done. I've been busy in my life, and if I had one thing to single out, it would be my 4 children who are 14 to almost 26. I'm also an only child, so that had an impact, I think, on my, how I interact, and I've had to learn to, the social aspect of life. I've had to learn in ways that people who have siblings kind of learn earlier in life. I love deep and meaningful conversations. So my favorite thing to do is to spend time with people I love and just have real, authentic conversations. Um, I, I used to be quite a bit more intense than I am now, sort of in interaction, and so I've cooled over the years, I guess. Those are the things that come to mind. First pass kind of thing. So
Yeah, no, that's fine. Also an only child here, so I do totally identify with what you just said. Um,
nice.
so another question would be, what event or circumstance in your life would you say has really shaped who you are?
I have a couple different answers to that. So the circumstance that probably shaped me the most is the relationship, the mother that I had, and the relationship I had with her. So the best way I could describe the shortcomings in my relationship with my mother is, if you think of the mirror stage of human development, where kind of the baby learns who they are in the reflection that they get from their caregivers, the mother. My experience with my mother was, if I, after the fact, understand it as like a cracked mirror, because my mom wasn't very present in contact, or she was fleeting in contact. And so I came to think of it as handicap. She had no ill intention. She wasn't abusive in any kind of explicit way, but it created a lot of hardship for me. And I started therapy when I was 19, and some of the characteristics I listed earlier. So I just kept going for the light and finding the light, finding the light, finding the light out of that pain of not knowing who I was and feeling unlovable. And so, yeah, that's probably been the biggest. It's funny because 15 years of therapy, and you ask me that question and I can feel the emotion right there. So yeah, yeah. Why don't I just stop there, because then there's other things maybe it'll come in other questions. That's the single most impactful thing.
Anything from later in life that comes to mind, maybe?
Well, yeah, so the thing that came to mind right with is a more recent experience, actually, with my parents, like to come full circle. Both my parents died 9 months apart, from my mom in late 2018 and my dad in September 2019. And so for 20 to 22 months, I was really involved in caring for them and helping them figure out the next steps. My mom had cognitive decline. that started 4 or 5 years before and went kind of like this. And then my dad had a bunch of health issues, and every time my dad was away, my mom declined, and I would go to be with her. She didn't want me, she wanted him. But having done all my good work, I was able to just really be with her and, grasp some really wonderful moments there, and have just really meaningful times with them, and just feeling like I was right in my place, and just that whole experience of a really difficult time, but dealing with it or interacting with it in a very intentional way actually taught me a lot, and actually made me want to share with people, because I think death of loved ones is is one of the hardest things that we can face. But so I did a talk on this topic, and I'm writing a memoir on my experiences, and so it's having so those are like the big the big things. So I 4 kids has been impactful. I'm divorced, so that had an impact. Learning to follow my heart in various ways had an impact. So I could answer lots of different things, but those are some of the real highlights.
Okay. Okay. Well, another question would be, who would you say has had an impact on who you are as a person, maybe beyond the people you've already mentioned?
Well, so I'd say, that's hard to single out. So, I talked about my mom. So my dad was a very positive influence on my life. Now it brought some questions as to how the two interacted, but my dad was always a great supporter of me and everything I wanted to do in my life, however crazy it may seem. So and he was there at the end too, and interacting with him in the ways that I described was very nourishing. Now, if I step away a little bit from my parents, I'm thinking of some men in my life. So my husband, who I picked very much to, I realize this after the fact, of course, but to replicate the pain of my relationship with my mother. So there was a lot of growth and development that came from that. And we had the 4 beautiful kids together. And so at the same time, built a lot of great stuff. And at the same time, supported and pushed my development as a person. So he had a big impact. And, we're now divorced, but we have a very good relationship when it comes to our children, and little else, but that's fine. I mean, we have I think we've had a very successful divorce, and so that's also a point of pride, if you'd like. I mean, just something I'm just feel good about getting to that place with him. Mm-hmm. And then I'm thinking about a man I've been involved with for 13 years now, with who I have a very beautiful love relationship. And so that's allowed me to blossom as a woman also. And I'm thinking also of a dear friend, a woman I've been friends with for 40 years now. We met when we were 12 and 13. And so we've kind of seen each other through different phases. And so those are some of the people close to my heart.
Okay. Well, making a little bit of a jump, the next question, I guess, would be, how did you come from wherever you came from in your life to Gestalt therapy? How did that meeting happen?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I think I mentioned that I went to therapy for the first time when I was 19. And I didn't encounter Gestalt therapy until a bit later, but I encountered a Gestalt therapist on my personal path when I was 26, I think, when I was pregnant with my second daughter. And so I did a few years of therapy with her, and I I really enjoyed that. Or I mean, I really enjoyed that. I mean, I felt that it did a lot of good for me, the Gestalt therapy that I got as a client. And so I was interested in discovering more. And so I did kind of the first 2 years of training at the Paris School of Gestalt, more as a continuation of my growth and development and my appetite, my curiosity for what more could come from that. And then, I continued to train. I love to train. I like that curiosity thing. Um, and it's when I turned 40 and I was like, what am I going to do when I grow up? I'm almost grown up. I should, I might want to decide. And then I decide basically it's like the fruit of all my work on myself. Like I felt like I wanted to give something back, contribute something. So I started practicing as a Gestalt therapist very slowly at the beginning. And, now it's more of a part of my a set of activities that I have where I would really like to contribute to world happiness, kind of one person at a time.
Hmm.
So.
Okay, so that's how you got there. And what did you find in Gestalt? What is it that specifically attracted you or caught your attention?
Yeah, for me, coming from having so much trouble feeling who I was. So it was really, I learned to feel with Gestalt. Somehow it seems weird to say it that way, but I think it's really what happened for me. And I just I remember at some point, early in my training that I felt like I had gone through life with a big plan of what I should do, or what I should achieve, or where I was heading to. And with Gestalt, I kind of discovered the smelling the roses and kind of following my nose, like a dog sniffing, or for where to go next, kind of small steps, like from here, where to go, and from there, and then like this, as opposed to like the freeway.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, what did
discovering the emerging interests.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And what is it that you would be interested in doing with Gestalt, or what are you doing with it?
Can you say a few more words about that question?
I mean, some people have a particular community that they want to work with, a particular project that they're creating or thinking about or have been doing for years. I'm just...
Yeah, so far I've done mostly in individual work. I also work with couples sometimes, but that's a minority of my of what I do. I'm interested probably in doing more of that. I would like to also have groups. Now, not necessarily Gestalt therapy groups, but like personal development groups. But of course, I bring the Gestalt therapist that I am to everything I do. So I am interested in doing more collective things, but more on the personal development level, if you want. Than therapy groups proper.
Okay. And how would you say that your experiences within Gestalt have affected you as a person?
Well, some of what I've already said, like just this learning to at the same time have plans and follow plans, but also pay attention to the emerging and to the sensations, and to kind of listen to my body and to take all of that into account. Has really changed my whole way of interacting with people, with the world, with circumstances, with difficulties, with everything. So it's kind of really transformed my being in the world in a way that I would say is much more aligned, that I'm much more able to make decisions that I'm in agreement with, or to, decisions or choices or actions. Yeah, and it's given me also a perspective on the other, how subjectivity, I guess, just it's like I breathe subjectivity. Like I don't, people don't agree with me. That's not a problem. Or people don't agree with one another. I don't see a problem with that. Or people have different, it just kind of subjectivity is part of the way I look at the world. I think that's also been kind of grew as I as I became more and more Gestaltist, I guess, if I could say
Yeah,
that like that.
that makes sense. It also makes sense to me as an only child. It's like it's a lot of life work realizing that there are other people in the world who are different. So I'm also wondering if any of this transformation has been around sort of the axis of gender and understanding yourself in your gender or as a woman. If there's anything that you would say about how you experience yourself in that sense. It's not a category that is really relevant to everyone, and I do understand that.
That's an interesting question. I do feel like I'll say it a little bit differently. With what I said about my parents, like I thought of myself for a while as having maybe reverse, Oedipus complex. Like I was the little boy. I know I can't remember how it worked now because I'm past that. But anyway, I felt like I had very some masculine ways of being, of thinking, of considering, maybe because I identified so much with my dad. And so over time, I've developed, gotten more access. I don't know exactly what the operative verb is, but gotten in touch with more what I would consider feminine ways of being, attributes, or I don't know, however, how much of it is related to Gestalt proper, or just, but your question was about the transformation. So the transformation, the alignment, the being able to be with, to welcome what comes. I think of those as more feminine ways, maybe. Or yeah, I certainly don't have answers about this. I'm kind of riffing on your question, but also I would say in my personal life, the relationship that I'm able to have now with the man I mentioned is, I see myself as more, I guess, more woman than I was able to be, 20 years back or whatever. So yeah, certainly the transformation, I've transformed along that dimension, but it's hard for me to peg it to something specific.
Not a simple cause and effect kind of process.
No. Yeah. Well, not for me anyway.
I don't think it really is for many people, but yeah. So another question would be whether you feel like you are somehow part of a Gestalt community. Does that phrase mean anything to you?
In a small way, I would say, but that's not been, it's not an easy feeling for me to get. So this is nice, like this, the training, the online Gestalt online training that I'm in right now, it gives a feeling of community. But here in France, I was alone in my geographic area, in my close geographic area for a while. Now there's a bunch of people, but we don't really communicate. So I'm a member of the National Association, but in France there were 2 and now there are 3. So because they tried to meet and they made a baby instead. I don't know. No, I mean the 2 associations, the third one was born out of the, instead of, anyway, whatever. Whatever that, but so yeah, it's the feeling of being part of a community is not one that I find easy to get, but I do invest some time, energy, a little bit of money into into trying to create that for myself and trying to participate in the effort to create that, let's just say, and then get that feeling for myself too.
Okay. So another question would be, what one of the or some of the larger challenges that you faced around Gestalt may have been, either as a trainee, as a professional, as part of this community?
Yeah, so a challenge that I've had that, I've had some explanation for in terms of my other occupations, but I find that it's, I I don't have such an easy time filling my calendar. I don't know if it's that I don't know how to, make myself be known, or, I mean, I'm working on all that obviously, but so it's, yeah, I've seen some people who had, full weeks, like easily in 3 months or whatever. And for me, that's always kind of a bit of a struggle. So I don't really understand it. I'm learning to be a bit more proactive about showing myself in different places. But
I don't know about where you trained, but I've noticed that in general, there seems to be very little support for developing our own sort of business model. It's like we get the soft skills, but then the administrative, marketing, kind of how to run this as an actual functional business life doesn't seem to be part of what we train each other in. It's like some kind of mystic secret. And
yeah, I
it would
agree
be
with
nice
that.
if people would tell us how this could actually work.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, to echo with that, like I've been interested more in the aspects of developing a business as I develop my other activities, and I wrote a book, and this and that, and how to make that known and whatever. And I find that it's helping me. So I just made a new flyer to distribute to doctors, osteopaths, whoever, people in my area. So that I'm in the process of doing that. But yeah, I had to kind of go a long way to get some of those skills in a completely unrelated way when it shouldn't necessarily be unrelated.
Yeah, that makes sense. And on the other side of that question, I guess, would be what you would say some of your greatest satisfactions would have been, somehow related to Gestalt?
Yeah, I mean, some of the transformations and people that I've seen are just really heartwarming, like lives that are really, infused with possibility, that didn't seem to be available. Somebody comes and they're like in the pits, and then, it might take years, but the person that comes out at the end of that, like it's just really a gratifying feeling of contribution, of having, really made someone's life a lot better. That's very moving to me. I'm thinking one particular person now, but I could think of several, but there's one that kind of stands out.
Do you want to say more about that or no?
Yeah, she was just a young woman who had been put in foster care by her parents when she was 16, and she struggled, like she held on, like she continued by sheer force of, and her mom died, so she paid for her studies. She worked while she was studying. There's a status for that in France. It's called alternance. And her mom died just before she finished her thesis or something, and she just kind of went downhill. Her mom, who was part of the parents who had put her in foster care, but somehow her dad was the bad guy and her mom was the good guy in her mind, and her mom died. And that, anyway, she crumbled, and she lived in her studio. Like, she wouldn't change the cat litter. She didn't open her shutters because she didn't want anybody to see. She would nourish herself with vodka and chips. And this is how she came to me. And it took 6 or 7 years, but she's now, we finished the therapy when I changed location, and it seemed like a good time to end for her. And she has a job. She bought her apartment. She has friends, a social life. And she's just in a completely different place that didn't seem, I mean, for the first 3 or 4 years, very little changed, on the outside, if you want. And so it seemed like God only knows what would have happened to her if she hadn't, but I mean, credit to her, right, for doing the work, but for
being part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just really, that's really a wonderful feeling to have, help raise that person to a place where she could live her life in a way that's, more satisfying. There were still things she wanted to improve, but I think now she has the skills to go after what she wants to go after, which she
And
didn't
it's
have
interesting,
before.
what stands out with what you said to me is that you're able to stay in those first few years. It's not a few sessions. And that's a little bit different. It's that sort of accepting the subjectivity that, okay, this is how you're living, and I can stay with you in that. Because I think a lot of other schools would be pushing for that to go away much faster, which may actually make it stay.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so, maybe back to the first question, that it's true. I do recognize myself as being able to stay with what is, like, so what is for me, but also what is with the people who come, like, and just supporting the emergence, really, and supporting the nothing if nothing's there, in hope for an emergence. I can't say that there weren't a few frustrating moments when, things aren't moving, and gosh, am I doing something wrong? Or is there something I should be doing, or what? So, I'm not saying it was as smooth for me always, like I'm just here. Sometimes it kind of itched a bit, but, and that was usually something, what I mean, relational also. When I say little, nothing moved on the outside, but obviously things were moving in between us and in her and me together. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that sounds interesting. And I guess the last thing that I would ask is where you see either yourself going in Gestalt, which I guess you've spoken to a little bit, or where you see Gestalt going in general in the world that we seem to find ourselves in these days.
Yeah, myself and Gestalt, I would like to help more people. I'm working on that. But yeah, I find the second part of or the way you phrase the question much more interesting. Like, it's striking to me in France when me Gestalt therapist, but also people who do, other therapies, other humanistic therapies. We're all in the yellow pages, in a section that's called En dehors d'un cadre réglementé, so outside of a regulatory frame, if you want. So from there to being outlawed is kind of, not such a far stretch of the imagination. And I think in Belgium, I don't understand exactly what's going on there, but it is much closer to being outlawed than it is here in France. And so I think there's a double movement here, where it's at the same time, I think, some of what can really help people, the world, communities. Some of the foundational, or some of the things that make Gestalt, I guess, I think have real healing power, power to find ways to move forward in a creative way, and to create things that kind of outside the box solutions to problems that, you can't find the solution if you stay stuck in the problem, all those things. I think Gestalt has a lot to potentially contribute. And at the same time, it's kind of pushed in a bit of a corner. And so I don't know if that's like always the case with kind of movements that have those characteristics. I mean, is it a necessary place to be, in the corner, to hold that possibility? I don't know. So where it's going to go, I mean, I'm standing for it having its transformative potential in people, in communities, and in the world. I'm standing for that. What's going to happen? If I knew,
You could market that.
I could market that, exactly. So no, I don't know where things are going, but I'm standing for things going in a transformative way that kind of creates better possibilities for everyone.
Okay, well, is there anything in particular that you would like to add at this point?
No, I'd just like to say I find it a really interesting approach to just explore the humanity of of people rather than their, I don't know, credentials, achievements,
Yeah, that's
whatever's.
yeah, it's the way that I've always sort of approached people. And I enjoy that people have responded, and it was really nice to be able to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Well, so thank you too.